I still haven't cooked the Tromboncino squash that I grew in my 2023 garden, and I need to clear out some space, so we're going to try them out. Hey friends, it's Barbra-Sue at Kowalski Mountain, and welcome back to the homestead. Now yes, we grew Tromboncino squash in our garden last summer as an experiment. We're growing Tromboncino squash as a feed source for our farm, but it's also something that we can eat ourselves. On the farm, the pigs will definitely eat Tromboncino squash, as well as the chickens. The cows can eat it, and I think goats as well. Now you can eat Tromboncino squash at two stages. You can eat them while they're small and green. They're more like a zucchini, and we tried that. They were okay. They were certainly edible, but I'd rather have a zucchini. And then you can also allow them to mature, and you can eat the winter squash. These have been stored up here in the RV all winter long, and hopefully they didn't get any damage from freezing, which I guess we're fixing to find out. But I thought that we would have these Tromboncino squash for dinner tonight, and I thought I'd bring you along. Now I'm sure you thought I forgot about them, but I didn't. I just hadn't done anything with them yet. Now we do have 3, and I'm just going to cook up 1 tonight and see what we think. If we don't like them, we've always got the chickens. So let's give it a try. Now I'm going to start with the smaller of the 3. This is actually the largest one that we've got. And you can imagine how it was to store these all winter. It's even more fun to travel with them. This one actually came back and forth to Kentucky a couple of times. We grew these in Florida before we moved here, and I actually brought it with me on a trip to cook it while we were here. And then I just never did. So I took it back, and then we brought it again when we moved. So this is a well-traveled squash. Now first thing I'm going to do is I'm going to wash it, and we're going to get it ready for dinner. Now here at Kowalski Mountain, this is a working kitchen. It is never a perfect kitchen. I actually covered up all my dishes in a dish drain just to keep them from getting wet and stuff when I was washing the squash. There's nothing under here hidden. It's just trying to protect my dishes is all. Now let's go ahead and chop this up and see if it has any damage from getting frozen this winter. Now we had some pretty cold temps, and even though we were warm here in the RV, this was up along the top of the RV, and I imagine it got pretty cold up there. Now I'm going to kind of treat this just like I would a squash. So maybe like a spaghetti squash or an acorn squash. I'm going to slice it down, and there should be seeds in here. I'm going to seed it out, and then I'm going to roast it. Looks very familiar, doesn't it? Just like a butternut squash. I'm definitely going to save these seeds because this is something that we're going to be growing a lot of for our animals. Now, Tromboncino squash, they are a heritage squash, and they are supposed to be very resilient and grow very well. Now we just got 3 large ones last year. We had a lot of little green ones, but we did have some worms that kind of got into them. Now you can also roast the rounds. I saw a recipe online that you could sprinkle Parmesan on them and have like a Parmesan roasted rounds. Probably try that. Now it's definitely working better to cut this into manageable pieces since it was so long and it wouldn't fit on my cutting board. I'm only wondering now if I should have peeled them for roasting for rounds now that I'm almost done cutting them. I'll look that up. It's going to be a lot harder to peel them now. Let's see. Thank goodness this recipe says don't peel. That makes me feel so much better. This recipe is simple to roast. It's just salt and pepper and garlic powder and sprinkled with a little bit of Parmesan cheese, which that definitely sounds good to me. This I'm going to cook more like a butternut squash. We'll get these in the oven and I'll let you know how they are. Now these Tromboncino squash were very easy to store. Of course they were just left out and the skins naturally hardened up like you would a winter squash, and I just had them here in the RV with us. I didn't have any refrigeration. I didn't do anything special. I didn't wrap them in any paper or anything. They were just up there on the top of the slide and left there until we could get to them. Now it's been months since we harvested these. I'll look up the exact date, but these grew in our garden last year. So that is a very good crop that would get us through the winter for our animals. Since our main goal is to raise these for our animals to eat, having enough food to get them through the winter is a really good reason to grow a lot of Tromboncino squash. So we're going to go ahead and cook this up. I'm going to put a little bit of olive oil in the bottom of my pan. And I have my Tromboncino squash. I'm just going to kind of rub that around in the oil a little bit. And let's do it like that. Do a little salt and pepper. And I'm cooking these more like I would a buttercup squash or like an acorn squash. I'm going to cook them upside down like this. Now I wouldn't typically cook both of these things at one time, but I want to try them both, so we are going to cook both at the same time. I'm going to cook some of these medallions right in the same pan. And they needed a little salt and pepper. And a little garlic powder. And we're going to top them with some Parmesan cheese. I'm going to pair this with some venison and a vegetable, not sure which, but this is going to go into the oven and bake until it is done. Let's get it in the oven. The Tromboncino squash looks like it's done, so let's get it out of the oven. Now the Parmesan rounds look really delicious. Now this is very hot right now. Now I just scrape it out of the shell. Roz. And this is how I would do like a butternut squash or an acorn squash. It's very hot. I'm not going to get too fussy because I'll give this to the chickens. Now it's definitely not near as much yield as you'd get from some of those other squash. Those other squash have a thicker flesh. Hey, quit. Those other squash have a thicker area that it's fleshy, whereas this doesn't have as much meat on the inside of it. Now I've got the rest of the meal on here. We're just going to have some corn and some venison. Now this has a really pretty color to it. Smells really good. Smells like a regular squash. It's not near as sweet as those other squash. It's not sweet at all, actually. Much prefer the other squash. Much prefer it. Let's try one of these rounds. No, I kind of feel the same way. I do wish I had peeled them. It's edible, but not my favorite. There are other squashes I like to eat a lot more. Thankfully, we're raising these for the animals, and I'm sure they're going to love it. Definitely could eat the squash. It's edible. I like it a little bit sweeter. I'm going to try to doctor this up with some honey. But I think those are going to be going to animals, and we're going to raise it for that purpose anyway, so that works out great. Well, friends, thanks so much for watching. I hope you've enjoyed coming along while I cooked a Tromboncino squash for the very first time. And, you know, just because I don't like it doesn't mean that you won't, so give it a try. As always, we really appreciate you watching to the very end. If you haven't hit that subscribe button yet, hit that button. We'd love you to be a part of the Kowalski Mountain family. Thanks so much. We'll see you next time.